Hello there and welcome to PM Express. There's a strong push for President Akufo-Addo to stay true to his promise of ensuring that metropolitan, municipal and district chief executives are elected across the country in conjunction with a raft of measures which experts believe will ensure rapid decentralization and reforms in our local government system. Well, it's been 3 years since President Akufo-Addo put on hold that national referendum on the election of MMDCs on grounds that there was need for further stakeholder consultations on the matter. After what appears to be a long wait, the Center for Democratic Development, the CDD Ghana, is beginning to reignite that old debate with that sole aim of building consensus and also getting some significant momentum which would lead to the eventual objective of ensuring some key reforms within our local government structures. I'll be getting to my guest shortly, who will be helping us with that discussion, but there's a need for us to paint that picture to you as to where we started from 3 years ago when the exercise started. And we start off with that promise, which even dates way back to 2016, when President Akufo-Addo was vying to be president. He made that pledge, of course, on behalf of the New Patriotic Party, that once they had formed government, this is what we're to expect, that once the NPP is elected, they would ensure that metropolitan, municipal and district chief executives will be elected across the country. That was the basic promise that was made by the New Patriotic Party at the time. The reality became different when, of course, the president took the reins of power. Because, mind you, more stakeholder consultation was necessary in ensuring that that push and that reform happens within our local government structure. So there's a need for us to look at the perspective of the opposition National Democratic Congress after the New Patriotic Party won power. Eventually, the NDC came out with its position stating why they believed that there was a need to do some more consultation on what it is that the New Patriotic Party had promised. Because initially, the NDC says they were under the impression that all of this was simply leading to one front, ensuring the election of metropolitan, municipal and district chief executives, and not necessarily making it a partisan exercise. Because mind you, per Article 55(3) of our Constitution, obviously, political parties are barred from sponsoring candidates for participating in local level elections. So that's where the hurdle is. And the NDC went ahead to point out clearly that they were kicking against the plan, arguing that it will be counterproductive if we introduce partisan politics into our local level election. And for now, we do know that that's not happening. Some say it's a sham because obviously there are tendencies in terms of partisan sentiments which trickle down into our local government structure. But that's another argument for another day. For now, all we know is that we're focusing on this process which started in 2019 when, of course, President Akufo-Addo started to amend Article 243 of the Constitution, trying to just cede off part of his powers, which makes him the ultimate decider on who becomes a nominee to the assemblies and eventually appointing them as head of state. So that process began in 2019 with that eventual hope that we're going to be subjected to a referendum, which would lead to the process where would, of course, have the election of our MMDCs. That did not happen. And this is what you need to pay attention to. December 17, 2019. I'm sure that many of you remember this picture when the president came in front of us addressing the nation and telling us clearly that the exercise, which was scheduled to, of course, allow Ghanaians to decide on whether or not we want our MMDCs elected, was going to be put on hold. And of course, the president explained that that referendum would not happen and that he was going to cancel the referendum. Obviously, knowing that the main and major stakeholder in this, the largest opposition political party, the NDC, had pulled out last minute, there was obviously no way and statistically no chance for the New Patriotic Party to push ahead with that agenda of ensuring that we elect our MMDCE. So the president decided to cancel it. And subsequently, we've heard from the president indicating clearly that the issue of the election of the MMDCs was still on the table, except that there was need for further stakeholder engagements on disagreements that many are having on the matter. But in terms of the sentiment of Ghanaians, we do know that there is a resounding belief in the local government process and the need to further decentralize it. So we don't have, for instance, a DC who's appointed by a president up there, sitting at the Jubilee House and just deciding what happens to our local or grassroots development. And that's why this very statistics is very critical. You need to pay attention to this. This was carried out in 2021. It's a survey by the Center for Democratic Governance, CDD, pointing out at the level of acceptance for that idea of electing our MMDCs. Stark revelation here. 20% believe that, well, allow the president to keep on nominating and appointing his DCs at the local level. But the majority of Ghanaians, 76% of them, believe that, look, if we're going to do this, let's start ensuring the election of MMDCs. That's what will work for us. So we are able to hold to account the leaders at the local level. And there are some further nuances to this, because you need to obviously take a look at this. This figure is quite critical because there's a difference on the ideology and how we could achieve that decentralization agenda. The issue as to whether or not we should gradually just allow political party participation at the local level, or keep it apolitical and allow the process to further roll on. And that's why this very dynamics is very important as to what people think about the partisan or non-partisanship of the local level elections in terms of the election of our MMDCEs, as to whether or not we should just remain where we are, make it non-partisan, or allow for partisanship. This is what the verdict is saying about what the people of Ghana think. 20% of them opted for partisan format, and a significant majority, 71% of them, varying from that 76%, which have that idea and believe that we should go ahead and do elections, they still go ahead to say, well, even if you're doing the election, we don't want partisanship at the local level. And that's what the CDD survey on that subject matter is pointing to us, giving us a sense of what would have happened if we're going into the referendum without amending that partisanship clause which the president was pushing for. And the issue about Ghanaian adults who want the 1992 Constitution amended to empower citizens to elect the MMDCs. There's a clear mandate and a clear vision that this survey is also pointing out. Majority of them, 50%, are in favor of the idea. 43% of them feel, well, let's just keep the status quo and allow it to remain same. So differing opinions on that. But there's that sense all throughout the three nuances that indeed Ghanaians want some level of changes at the local level. And when it comes to local governance, there's a need for us to do some key reforms. And that's why there's that push coming through from CDD Ghana just to achieve three key objectives. I'll tell you about the first one, which is to build consensus, because even the president himself believes that there's a need for us to bring on board all stakeholders, be it the political parties, the traditional leaders, even the local government structure itself, because at the base of it, you have the unit committee persons and also the various assembly members who have a say in this, because initially they would have to endorse the DCs once the nomination comes through from the president. But now, of course, there's a need for us to get consensus from all these relevant stakeholders. So that's the first objective CD is trying to achieve with this. The second point is to develop a roadmap for implementation of that promise. Will it ever happen? We don't know for now, but of course the hope is that giving this new push that we're seeing from CDD and the likes, there will indeed be some reforms, and finally we'll build some sustainable coalition from CSOs to actually champion that local government reform that we're all on the lookout for, because there's scientific data to back the point that there's a need for decentralization. How do we achieve that? I'm gauging the perspectives of the academia and some more experts here on PM Express. Be my guest as I tell you more about who's joining me tonight. And you're welcome back to PM Express. Let's bring in our guest now. Fortunately, I have Professor Nicholas Saochi, who's the director for the Institute for Local Governance, joining us via Zoom. We also have Awal Mohammed Karima. He's with RISE Ghana. He's the executive director of that organization, helping us with the discussion. Good evening to you, gentlemen. Welcome to the show. So let's start off with you, Prof. 2019, and it's been almost 3 years since that promise was put to some level of effect in terms of trying to get the election of MMDCEs. Why do you feel that it's taking us such a long time to at least restart the process after I stalled 3 years ago?
Thank you very much, Blessed, and good evening to your viewers. Yes, it's taking 3 years because there isn't currently consensus on the areas that require reforms. The 2019 aborted referendum was basically to amend Article 55.3 to allow political parties to participate in the local government elections. Because there was a consensus, the referendum was heading to, let's say, a failure. And the president asked for consensus. And the studies that CDD and others have done indicate that there are many Ghanaians who would want to see political parties participate in local government elections. And this is quite strange that Ghanaians want multi-party democracy and will prefer that when it comes to the local level where issues affect people directly, they appear to have different view that they do not want political parties. But we all know that there are currently in our districts and our communities, political parties participating in even local district level elections. So it is taking us some time to agree. And when I said agree, the two major political parties to agree on the way forward. And so civil society bringing the issues up again is timely. Besides, I think the president himself has also asked for consensus that if there is consensus, he will want to bring it back and during his tenure. I think that the minister of local government is also keen on having this conversation and to follow the president's request for consensus. So I think gradually, we're coming to that kind of discussions, and I think bringing it back is
the issue has got to do with the divergence in ideas, of course, as to whether or not we should be doing that on partisan lines. And that is where I want to pick up your thoughts on, because I'm not too sure if you were ingrained in national discourse at the time we're framing the 1992 Constitution, but you would have been old enough to be around and to know what may have gone into that notion of framing the local level system in such a way that it's sort of immune to partisanship and the interference from political parties. Are you able to tell us what may have accounted for that?
Sure. So 1992, before we went into multi-party, we had a military regime. And Ghana used to have the local council system, which had only 65 councils. So in 1988, the whole local government system was reviewed, and then we brought in a number of districts making up 110 and introduced PNDC Law 207. And that law also didn't allow political parties because we were in the military regime. And so it was obvious that the military regime wasn't going to allow political parties to participate. Then fast forward, we went into a democratic system. And the transition to that democratic system, the whole of the PNDC Law 207 was exported straight into that constitution without any change. And during that discussion, or during the transition, or with the referendum for accepting that constitution, it was either yes or no. And we didn't have time to say, well, we didn't like this part of the constitution, that we should remove the idea of non-political party systems into local government. There was no choice.
So your point then is, if not for the circumstances leading to the adoption of the 1992 Constitution, you believe that there would have been a change, at least if not in terms of the framing, would have been more relaxed to the idea of having political party participation at the local level. Is that what you're saying?
Sure, yes. In fact, if there was that opportunity, Ghanaians would have said, no, take out that article, 553, because basically it was opposite what Ghanaians were looking for. Ghanaians were looking for multi-party, and they didn't want multi-party at a central level and and one party or non-party system at the local level. No, but there was no choice. And so the whole of 207 was sent into the 1992 Constitution without any amendment, without any change at all. Then, 30 years after, we still have the same thing. And, once a system is put in place and that system benefits some individuals and institutions, there's a tendency for them to hold on to that institution and not to change it, because it benefits those it benefits some people. And that's why we have seen political parties, anytime they are in opposition, they want that change. But when they are in government, they want it maintained so that they could use the opportunity that it provides to, provide jobs for, party foot soldiers, for those who actually campaign for them. So to fill in the political positions. So once you have that advantage, you wouldn't want to lose it. And then you would need a courage. You need, let's say, a leader who says, I want to let my power go. And I have done this research in other places. In many countries, especially in Latin America, when they moved from appointment of mayors to election of mayors, it was a time when the government knew that it was going to lose election.
Right. And we'll be talking about that research and then what you're finding. I want to bring in Awal at this moment because, if you take a look at our democratic system as we speak, there's been the concern, even from CDD and other stakeholders, about the winner takes all syndrome. The fact that once you have a political party ruling, the others are not involved. I'm not sure we want to transpose that into our local government system. And the fear is when that trickles deep down into that level, we may have some problem on our hands.
Yes, in fact, there are several concerns in terms of our local governance system, how it's currently structured, and how we can improve it to ensure that the electioneering processes doesn't seem to favor the winner takes all. So let me say good evening to you and your viewers, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss this important matter. Yes, I think that it's a great concern that that's why civil society is pushing for some of these reforms, so that you will know that people are elected at the local government level by the local people, and they are accountable first of all to the local people. And when you look at the way our local governance system is structured and the role of the district assemblies, their core mandate is to promote local development of the respective enclaves that they represent. And so with that, if there is an appointing authority, the accountabilities tend to dissipate towards the appointing authority instead of to the local people. So what basically we are calling for is reforms that would allow active local participation and strengthen the accountability in terms of the local level, so that we want to see a situation where if the president of the country is coming to, say, Bolgatanga, where I live, the district chief executive or the municipal chief executive should be able to say, oh, Mr. President, you are welcome to the region, and then go back and carry on with their work. But we are in a situation where, because the appointment is done at the center without the active participation of the grassroots, the district chief executive and district assemblies are compelled to contribute to the arrival of the president, whoever is coming. They contribute in monetary terms as well as everything styles. The district chief executive is expected to be personally around. You find that when they are coming to each region, all the district chief executives come together to line up and to pay homage and to support. So all the work.
So obviously, as you're pointing out, the issue of the appointment may be a challenge, and that you are open to the idea of an election. I mean, that's been established even with the research work done by CDD Ghana in terms of what Ghanaians think about the process. But the issue about equating, for instance, election of MMDCs to their efficiency, that is also being called into question. You agree?
Well, no, and you see, the election of DCEs, first of all, we want to ensure that there's a level playing ground for everybody. The appointment is not held by the center. And once we know that you are elected on a competitive basis and you are accountable to the people who have elected you, then it brings efficiency. And then also, it will come to a system where there is a lot of competition at the grassroots level. There's a lot of, it's open up for ideas. You know, when we talk about the appointment, people are appointed basically based on political parties, and the appointing authority determine who gets appointed. But with the elections, we have more quality of people coming in, and there's a lot of diversity inside there. And that alone is going to bring a lot of quality and competition. And you know that once the accountabilities are stronger and related to the people, you derive the mandate from the people, then the quality of the leadership that you are going to deliver would be far, far better. We need to test this, and other countries have done it, and the results are very clear. Prof would tell you that a lot of other countries are doing this, and there's results to show that the quality of governance has improved over time.
And in fact, we'll be getting into the science of it, but I'm forced to make the comparison between what's happening at the national level and the local level, because if we allow for partisanship to trickle down to that level, or not necessarily partisanship, but even the elections to trickle down, it means that there's going to be competitive elections. If you take a look at what's happening to the trend of our political cost alone, that's an area we should be worried about. Look at how much it costs one to just be, say, a member of parliament. The figures are ranging over, I guess, $400,000 US. I'm yet to cross-check that figure. But then, if you look at that political cost, which is input out by institutions such as CDD, the concern is that the cost may also increase at the local level, and that will begin to influence the quality of leadership that's being elected. Do you have a concern on that regard as well?
Well, you see, the cost of elections, as we are concerned about the fact that, in fact, we were recently at a meeting in Accra, and one of the MPs was saying that, in fact, there are some hidden costs to elections that are not known, that we cannot tell. But the reality also on the ground is that Ghanaians generally want MMDCs to be elected. The decision now, the disagreement now is around whether it should be on partisan lines or non-partisan lines. But competitive processes are generally expensive. But there is a price for open governance and democracy that we cannot run away from. And we must admit that these quality things come with cost. And therefore, once quality things come with cost, we must begin to accept certain costs. However, it is when we open up the elections for everybody to participate, it's actually, I see it as a form of reducing costs, not necessarily increasing. I don't see an increment of cost in terms of when it's open up and the elections are done at the level where everybody is free to participate. We don't anticipate that the cost should rather increase the cost of elections.
And Prof, the question about how soon that should be happening. 3 years is too much a time to wait for. But what's your projection in terms of the first hurdle that we need to cross, for instance, dealing with the opposition political parties who have representation in parliament and also even at the grassroots level? The NDC, for instance, says we don't need partisanship. So if that's going to be the disagreement between the NDC and the MPP, we may have to delay the process further.
Yes, I think so. The president has asked for consensus. I don't think when the president asked for consensus, he didn't mean that it should be partisan or non-partisan. I think, the consensus could be both two parties agreeing to, political parties participating, or, we only have to amend Article 243, which is the appointment without political parties, and then there's no referendum. If we go by the referendum, which means amending 55.3, then the process can be very lengthy. Then I'm afraid this year it's not possible. Next year, we have the local government election. If the two political parties can agree, then there'll be no challenge at all, because what we have seen is that the two parties control about 90% of dedicated Ghanaian voters, and they listen to their party leaders. So if the two parties can agree, then even the referendum can be done quickly. By next year, by the time we go for the local government election, that is there. But given that they have already appointed MDCs, perhaps 2024, when we do the general election, then we could have the ballot paper, including the mayors, and then we will have to vote for them. But all depends on having the two parties agree. And currently, they are widely apart. The MPP asked for partisan or political multi-party system. In the election, the NDC is asking for a non-partisan, and there appears to be, they appear to be widely apart. We have waited all these years, and I can tell you, since the nation, Ghana, or the state Ghana, we've never had the opportunity to elect a mayor. 100 years, and we are still counting. We haven't had in our lifetime, for 100 years, elected our own mayor. And this is where it is irony. If we believe that multi-party is the only tested means of electing leadership, and it's only tested means in terms of multi-party democracy, then why are we saying we do not like multi-party at the local level, but we like it at the central level? Look, if today we put it to a vote, opinion poll, whether Ghanaians want multi-party at the national level, if you're not careful, we'll get about half of saying we don't want multi-party level, even at the national level. You see how Ghanaians have become. So they don't like multi-party, neither do they like military regime. So the two. So currently we have only one party at the local level. It's not apolitical, it's one party, because it's only the ruling party that appoints. So it is one party, and many Ghanaians don't want one party. So we don't know what we want, and it appears that we are becoming, I don't know what to say.
Yeah, but when you say that's been left to the governing party, some say the trend is not entirely the same. You have representation, and in fact, there's a constitutional requirement of some 2/3 majority of the local assembly members who are elected officers to approve the nominee of the president. They have the decision to think otherwise. So it's not entirely an autocratic process, or perhaps a more of a one-sided process, if you want to put it across that way.
No, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's 2/3, but we are talking about democratic systems, and you want to see that even 242 and 249 are repealed, so that the people elect. Let the people elect their councillors or assembly members. Let them elect their mayor. And I was saying that for over 100 years, we have never in this country elected our mayors. That's what I'm emphasizing.
Oh, you mean pre-independence and post-independence? I guess that's what you're referring to, right?
Exactly. We have never, not in the history of this country, not in the history of this country, have the people elected their mayor.
Okay, you've carried out some research into this, and
Yeah.
it's pointing out that there are some benefits to us if we begin to open up the system and allow for the election of mayors, as you're calling them. We call them DCEs or
Yeah.
the MMDCEs.
Yes, I mean, if you look at the benefit of competition, in fact, currently the MDCs come in without any plan, of their own. They promise very little or nothing at all, and they deliver very little with little accountability to the people. Accountability goes up to the center, and that is not good enough. We want accountability to the local level. If you compare what is happening now to the members of parliament, you will see members of parliament, although it is not their responsibility to provide, the basic needs of the people at the local level, water, education, health, and other things, they go beyond their duty to make sure that their constituencies get all of this. You wouldn't see many, unelected DCs going beyond, their call to make sure that these are provided, except when, it's coming from the center, and you realize that most of them depend on the common fund. On their own, there's little pressure or there's little sense of urgency. But if they are elected, many of them will feel the same pressure that members of parliament feel. And that will even reduce the pressure on members of parliament. So that is one. Then you will see also in terms of participation. Currently, if you compare the local level election participation by citizens to the national level, you could see it's about double. You see the local government elections, less than 40% of citizens turn up. In fact, sometimes even there are some places you don't get people to even apply to be elected, or let's say, bring themselves up to be elected. So these are some of the things. Then you have a situation where the two political parties, once they are in government and once they're in opposition, the opposition always criticize government for not doing enough. But once they participate at the real time, people will compare what they are doing in their own small local government that they control, whether they are doing something different. So, for instance, you live in Accra. Let's say Okankwe, MPP is in power.
Right.
They control that municipality. The services that they deliver, if NDC is in power, they will be comparing. Now they cannot sit and say, armchair politician, always criticizing. People, real time will question them in your own municipality where you control. What have you done? Have you improved the situation? So there's no, armchair, criticism from the opposition that will come. So there are a number of advantages, whether we elect them politically, partisan or apolitical. There are advantages more than the one-party appointment of mayors we have now.
Karim, the issue, while the issue of the duplication of the process, that is something we also need to look at. You take a look at the structure as we speak.
Hello?
The member of
Yes.
parliament.
So can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And I was just about asking the issue about the duplication of the structure. As it is now, you have a member of parliament who's an elected officer. The system allows him to be recognized as an ex-officio member of the assembly. And then we're moving and asking that we elect another officer who is the administrative head of that assembly. So if we move in that, direction to have two elected officers on top virtually of that local assembly process, could that not bring some unnecessary competition in the event that you have the DC belong to, say, the National Democratic Congress and the MP belonging to another political party? Awal, are you still there with us? Yes, you have to unmute so I can hear the point you're making. Hello, Awal? Awal, can you hear me? Kindly unmute.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, precisely. The issue about the duplication. Yes.
Yes. So I think that there is no, you see, there are all these things we are talking about on all these advocacy points we are making. There are best practices from elsewhere that we have seen. First of all, I heard you speak to Prof about the benefits, and Prof very well elaborated the benefits. And when we go back to, for instance, as close as Nigeria, where they practice the federal system, there was a timing point where one of the governors, the governor of Lagos, Fashola, indicated that he didn't want to take any, what we call here the common fund. He didn't take any money from the state. He went to Lagosians and told them that you people elected me as your mayor, and this is the mandate I'm supposed to deliver. Pay your property rates, give me the local revenue that I can mobilize, and measure my performance over a period of time in my tenure. And it came out strongly that he did very well for Lagos. The level of development and the quality of life of the people improved. This was a person who was independent of the state, was able to deliver the results to the people because he was accountable to the people. But come back to our various district assembly. When was the last time we saw the local assembly going after people to collect property rates? And even the property rates and the fee fixing resolutions that they fix at the district assembly level, how up to date is it? How often do they update it? Some of the places they are using 1960 rates, they are using as far back several years ago rates to be able to calculate this. It's because there is no competition, there is no accountability. We know that at the end of the day, whatever happens, the central authority will just stamp. And then also, if you look at the way our local governance system is structured, you realize that some of the structures are just there. Administratively, they exist, but they don't seem to perform any reasonable function. So the issue of the duplication is, it's not just something that we can worry about in terms of electing our DCEs, because then they have a clear mandate in terms of the people that elected them into office and the performance contract that they have that they are able to deliver to the people. At the end of the day, the people come and they elect, endorse them, or take them out of office based on the performance that they have executed.
So let's explore the issue of supporting less endowed districts, because obviously resources are not even across the region or across the country. There's that challenge that's going to emerge. If you look at what the constitutional stipulations are as we speak, there seems to be some fair distribution of state resources to almost every part of the country using the District Assembly Common Fund, except that there's provision for the IGF. How do we make up for that, particularly when we're going to move into that zone where we are decentralizing further and allowing the district chief executives to be elected? Because if you're still giving that power in terms of financial power and tool to the central government, then it's as though there may be some influence and control from the center. So are we decoupling that as well, even as we move into that era for you?
Is this to Prof or me, Prof?
Yes, to you. Wow, yes.
Yeah, so basically, when we consider one of the things we are also asking for is the fiscal decentralization, so that at the fiscal level, there is that autonomy for people to be able to generate their revenue. And let me be very blunt here and say that, in fact, some of us believe that we are using the policy of equality to address inequality. There are some metropolitan and district assemblies that actually do not need this common fund. Their internally generated fund alone is several times over the money that the central government gives them as part of the common fund. And in fact, if we look at it critically and we want to really be fair to promote local development across the country, I think that some of the metropolitan district assemblies should actually be weaned off the common fund. And then also, there are some of the local assemblies that we can engineer local revenue mobilization by tying their allocation to their ability to raise match funding. So we can say that when you match up a certain amount of money as a local district assembly, then you have a certain capital coming from the central government to add to that. But honestly, we need to look at decoupling and reducing, actually winning off some of the advanced districts from this district assembly common fund. And then also we are decentralizing, and we're saying that we are engaged in local governance of the people and promoting local development. But over the years, the central government has refused to engage in physical decentralization. So you find district assemblies buying things from the center that they don't really need. The priorities of the districts are different from what the Ministry of Local Government and then the central authority is purchasing for them. So we are calling beyond just allocations in terms of national kitty and through the district assembly common fund to decentralize physically, so that the district assemblies are able to have autonomy to raise their own money, as well as to be able to determine some of the expenditure. But as things stand now, they are limited in some of the areas because the money comes from the center. So we have a local governance system that is decentralized, but the physical decentralization hasn't happened. And that unfortunately has been one of the banes for poor local development. That's why we as civil society, together with some academia individuals, are asking for some of these reforms, so that when we devolve from the power level and we also decentralize physically, then it can bring about the needed momentum to drive the local development at the grassroots level.
This is an issue I want to have your thoughts on, and not just you a while, but I want to bring in Prof at this moment, because you will also come through with your thoughts on that. Prof, the issue about even the participation whenever we're going in for the local level elections. Representation is really down whenever we're going into that exercise. I'm not too sure of the last figure, but it's certainly not more than 10% in terms of, participation as compared to that of the national exercise. It goes then to point out how some persons simply don't care about going in to vote for an assembly member, talk less of voting for a DC or an MC or an MMDC, if we could refer to them as such.
Yes, the participation, or what we call the voter turnout at the subnational level or the local government level, is less than 40%. It has been so for some time now.
Less than 40%.
Less than 40%.
Okay, so that's the fact there, right?
Less than 40%, and it has been so for the past 4 or 5 elections that we have conducted. When we started the election at the local level in 1988, we had a pretty good figure, I think around 54% or something. Since then, it's going down, and it's now less than 40%. And in fact, sometimes the elections happen without even people knowing that something is even taking place. And that is the reason why some of us are pushing for the political party systems, because then you use the party structures to mobilize. And I think the political party system we have here, perhaps we need to also improve on it. Political parties are not just for elections. It must have mobilization wings. It must also promote, ideas, fertilization of ideas, and let people be, let's say people will hover around that particular idea and push for it. We don't have that. And so we realize that when it comes to representation, even of women, and this is where here we are looking at borrowing some ideas from Uganda, where some seats or areas are carved as women, and they let women affirmative action through elections, where women only compete, so that there will be representation of women. There will be representation of people with disability. If you leave it as it is now, where at the district assembly, the assembly members, are voted the 2/3, whereas that participation of people with disability, women, and special groups are very limited. So that is how we can do it. But let me mention something. Let me say something about the sort of reforms that are being asked. We are looking at three types of reforms. On the political side, which is something that we haven't had, the democratic decentralization, we haven't had that. We have some element of fiscal decentralization where, because of the common fund and assemblies are also able to, collect their own internally generated revenue. So there are some revenue areas that are ceded to them. Then we have some expenditure assignments, some areas that are also they have to incur, and so some services. We need a situation where once we allow DCEs to be elected, we also improve on our fiscal side. Otherwise, we will set the DCEs up to fail. Once they are elected, they will come with promises, big ideas, transformation. Then they will go to the districts and then realize that, well, they can only depend on central government money. If the central government doesn't come, then they can't function. And this is where, if you do it apolitical or non-partisan, you will have a situation where DCEs will be elected on their own without any central government backing, any political party at the central level backing. So you will set them up to fail. Then we have the human resource. Almost 90% of people who work at the local level are hired, paid, appointed, dismissed, motivated by the center. So the allegiance is to the center and not to the local level. So we have that challenge. So we want a situation where the human resource aspect will also be reformed so that the DCEs, once they are elected, they also have the power to hire.
But that may come naturally, even with the devolution of the fiscal aspect, because if the finances are cleared, any DC at all could go ahead and exercise that administrative power.
Yes, but that means there must be that reform. If we don't reform that aspect, and we go with the current one, where for the whole of the nation, you look at 261 local government, their IGF is less than 2% of the national revenue. The total 261 assemblies, their mobilization of their revenue is about 2 to 3% of the national revenue, which is so low. So they're dependent on the central government. You understand?
Right.
And if the central government holds the purse, then it dictates to you what you do at the local level.
6 months apart from the parliamentary and presidential elections. That's what the Constitution says in terms of what gap we should have in terms of going through the process of electing persons at the local level, at least 6 months. If we're piling this next layer of having the DCs also on, will that not make the process cumbersome? Because the belief is, once we're done with that of the assembly members, they then form an electoral college and go through that simple exercise of affirming who the DCE should be.
No, I think once we get the reforms, it's possible we can organize the national level election, the local government level election to coincide with the national. So you go to the polling booth, you vote for president, you drop the ballot paper, you vote for a member of parliament, you drop it in another box, and you vote for your mayor. And then that is it. It's simple.
Right.
For the council one, it will also be the same, but the time difference. So maybe we can say the council one is next year. That's the assembly election. It's next year.
Right.
We can easily do that. But the mayor one, I think we should do it together with the national.
Anyway, well, we need to be wrapping up, but then that key question remains as to where we could be going from here. The president says stakeholder consultations. That's not happened over the 3-year period. So I'll start off with you again, Prof, just before I bring in Awal to wrap up with us. And the issue about what the biggest hurdle is and how we can address that so that we can make progress.
I think the biggest hurdle currently would be having the two major political parties arriving at a consensus. If we don't get them to agree, we shouldn't make a step because it will never succeed. Because the two political parties are the ones that will make or make the whole thing.
Right.
So if we can't get them to agree, then we can't proceed.
Awal, a minute for you as we wrap up. where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? Thank you very much. I think there's an urgent need, and the desire for all Ghanaians is to see our local governance work effectively. And there's a current confusion about the role of the MP. We keep hearing people say that our status, the role of the MP is to make laws, not necessarily promote local development. So that confusion is there. We need to elect somebody to have the oversight for ensuring this local level development is happening. And electing the MMDCEs would help us to achieve that. And so if you look at it critically, it's actually going to strengthen our governance system. And so CDD Ghana and other CSOs that belong to the Coalition for Local Governance Reforms are just basically calling for state actors, especially Parliament, as well as the President, to revisit the campaign promises that was made in terms of introducing some reforms for these local level elections. And particularly, we're interested in the reforms on Article 55.3 as well as Article 243 that government has promised to look into.
Right. And we'll see what will happen, what the president will say about this, and as Parliament resumes from recess, we'll see what the consultations will be. Ahmed Karima, Executive Director for RISE Ghana, and I'm also grateful to Professor Ocho, who's the Director for the Institute for Local Governance, joining us here on PM Express. My name is Blessed Sogah, and of course, if you need more news, just log on to myjoyonline.com.